Welcome back to Africa Business Radio. It's been quite an interesting conversation here, talking about our investment tip just ended about cryptocurrencies and mistakes you should avoid while investing in cryptocurrency. And yes, I mentioned that we'll be having a guest coming to talk to us about the skepticism and criticisms surrounding cryptocurrency investment much later on the show. But right now, still talking about investment, we'll be looking at the impact investment and the growing shift toward meaningful finance in Africa, because the current global trend towards more meaningful purpose-led investment, otherwise known as impact investment, has shown that there are real opportunities for a stable, growing investment portfolio. Now, I'll be having a guest join me right now on the show, Allan Wood. He is the Global Head of Business Development at Jersey Finance, joining me for conversations on this topic. Good morning, Allan Wood. Good to have you here on the show.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Right. Thank you for joining us. So just getting right into the topic now, there are, talks about what the broad idea behind meaningful finance is. So just for a start, what is the idea behind, meaningful finance?
Yeah, no, so I suppose meaningful finance from our perspective is quite a broad church. So you've got sustainable finance, impact investing, all under ESG. But where we see a bit of a shift is that all coming together under commercial capital transactions and putting capital to use for positive impact and generating a financial return. So this could be coming from, historically it would have been governments through DFIs, but more corporates, pension funds, and significantly more private investors. I think one of the things that I would highlight, historically, many big corporates, there's been a bit of a disconnect between profit and purpose.
Right.
So they've been creating value for shareholders, which is important. And then they might be doing, charitable philanthropic endeavors through maybe another arm of their organization, but it was always funded from profits. And what we're seeing is more and more global businesses are creating a link between profit and purpose, which is really exciting, particularly for emerging markets.
Right.
If we tie this back to Jersey, Jersey's got significant links with Africa over many decades. And you could arguably look through that lens of it was, driven by profits. But we are seeing a big shift into impact investing, and it's going to be quite exciting over the next 5 or 10 years, I would say.
Interesting. One would now wonder how this plays into the world of capitalism.
I think that's quite interesting because I think capitalism is changing. It's certainly changing at the moment. I think COVID-19 has accelerated that. But I think the big society problems have always generally been left for governments to solve. And, I think what is happening is, private sector is now starting to play a central role in driving systematic changes. And again, linking back to that profit and purpose as a key narrative. From our perspective, millenniums certainly have a significantly different view of the world. And so Jersey, as custodians of 600 billion of private wealth in, private wealth structuring, that capital is moving into the next generation. And we're seeing that they want to use that inheritance towards ending economic and racial inequality. And that is an agenda that is getting driven particularly fast.
Right.
And then I think, just looking through something similar, I was at a presentation recently, and somebody said something quite profound, which was, there's no point having a large pension pot if you can't breathe the air. And I think people are starting to realise that, sort of making wealth without having a view of what's going on around us, and particularly in emerging markets. If I look at my own activities, I've been coming to Africa for about 7 years, and you just can't ignore the poverty that is around you. And we all have a role to play in to try and drive this capital, sort of create good as well as profit. And I think so that agenda is shifting at pace, and I think it'll have an impact on capitalism.
Now let's talk a bit about impact investing as a form of meaningful finance. Now, impact investing is commonly known within venture finance. Is it more than this, or what's the broad application of impact investing?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. I think impact funds can come in several forms. So starts at angel investing, then venture capital, then private equity. and then into asset management portfolios that people might, have designed as a bespoke portfolio for an individual. But the size of these funds could be anything like $1 million right up into $1 billion. And I think where we're seeing the vast majority of opportunity through a Jersey perspective is through the private equity lens. So you've got investors around the world that are pooling capital in Jersey, and they are not necessarily an impact fund as in a traditional sense, but the investors are specifically asking what impact and what sustainability are you going to deliver, and that's getting built into the prospectuses. So actually the last maybe 6 or 7 African funds that we've seen that have come through Jersey are very much commercial in their outlook, but the underlying reporting that the private equity managers are being asked is very linked to ESG and impact. And I think then you look at individual clients are starting to build portfolios, and again, they are designing portfolios that have an impact. So I think you're right. It does start from acorns and it does start from sort of venture capital, but we are seeing a big shift into the private equity space, and I think that's only going to continue over the years to come.
And of course, our concern right now, especially in the current, global landscape of impact financing, is where Africa stands, especially if you look at the recent Continental Free Trade Pact. So on the policy side, where would you say Africa stands?
So I suppose, the Global Impact Investing Network, known as GIN, their annual impact survey of 2020 confirmed or estimated the size of the impact space is $715 billion. And so that is a significant amount of capital. From an African perspective, this is golden opportunity, I would say, particularly with the resources that Africa has, the young population, the growing education that is taking place as well. And so investors are looking at Africa as a destination for investing anyway. But as you look through that lens of impact, you get a double whammy. So you're having people, particularly private equity firms and impact, like organizations like Leapfrog, where they are designing products that will give you a return, but a huge impact. So Africa is very well positioned to take advantage of this capital that is being gathered. From a COVID-19 perspective, I think, reshaping investors' thinking as well is that, environmental and social issues means that the continent, again, looking through whatever lens you want through an impact or sustainable finance space, really does lean to Africa. Right. Just linking back to that report again, out of impact investors, 43% are already exposed to African investments. And what the survey did confirm is they are likely, 52% of them are likely to invest more capital into Africa over the next 5 years. And so from my perspective, being involved in Africa for the last 7 years, I see a shift of inquiries, and actually I'll see our industry evolving into the impact space. So I can only see more capital over time being directed at Africa because of the demographic opportunity and the growth opportunities as well. I think when you look at, while sustainable finance is growing in global markets, when you look at Africa as well, you have that technology, healthcare and infrastructure opportunity. And so there's lots of capital in the Western world that is not being put to use because of low interest rate environments. So they are trying to find investment opportunities, and it does lean towards emerging markets. But then it comes down to trying to mitigate risks of investing into emerging markets. So you have to pick your partners very well.
Right. Of course, as you mentioned, the global pandemic changed a lot of things in that space. And I see how you shed light on the role of meaningful finance here. But then again, the business world is based on, many levels of negotiations, which AI cannot do. So how incapable does this make AI compared to what the human mind can actually do?
Well, I suppose when you're looking from an African perspective, mobile technology has connected Africa like never before. And so I mentioned an organization called Leapfrog, where they are selling insurance products. So, if you have somebody that's into agriculture and they need to put a crop out, then there's a 95% chance that's going to be fine, but there's a 5% chance that, there could be a problem, there could be a drought, or, there could be flooding, and then they lose their livelihood. And so having mobile technology and AI coming across Africa is actually leapfrogging the rest of the world. There is opportunities that are being created out of technology that, it would be difficult to implement in some parts of the Western world. And so I think technology, you're right, technology needs to create jobs as well. But if you look at, Safaricom, I think the number of employed as a result of the Safaricom investment all them years back, last time I heard there was about 120,000 people that created a job as a result of just Safaricom alone. And that business was an investment of $3 million. And I think it's now a $7 billion business. And so I think the reality is we need to use technology, but looking through a lens of how we can create jobs and economic growth in Africa. So actually, I see AI and technology as a positive rather than a negative.
Wow. All right. Now, you mentioned opportunities. We have portfolio asset managers at this point, and I'd like to know where the opportunities are for these guys when it comes to impact meaningful finance.
So I suppose ESG investing has never been more profitable. So I think, historically, there was disconnect of, you can't do profit and purpose. And I think the trend is significantly changing. Now, there's some asset managers that are pure impact, like Tribe Capital, which is a really interesting business. But the existing asset managers are really shifting at pace. And I think that's because impact investing is not about wealthy individuals and families anymore. It used to be for the elite wanting to give back, because they've made a lot of wealth over many decades, and it was time to give back. And that's where we saw the vast majority of capital flowing. But now, people, just normal people like myself that are building a pension portfolio, they want it to be put to work and have a meaningful output as well as a financial return. And so from a Jersey perspective, I could just look at the asset management industry here, which is really deep. Every couple of weeks, there's new products and services that are coming out. We just had one over the weekend. And I think what you'll see is that evolve at pace. So as I mentioned before, Jersey is a custodian of 600 billion of private wealth. The underlying investors and wealth holders are demanding these products are available. So if the asset management industry doesn't create them, then that money will flow somewhere else. So I think the opportunities are significant. I think the other thing I would just mention that from a South African fund manager perspective, we've seen a lot of South African fund managers raising capital across Europe and the US, and then that capital is coming back into the continent. The South African managers investing in Nigeria through shopping malls and various other things. And so particularly Western investors are very interested in this. But, your standard banks and the big asset managers are all shifting at pace. From our own perspective, we've just created a new initiative, a sustainable finance fund called Jersey for a Wilder World, which was established and launched literally last week. And that was a collaboration between the government of Jersey, the industry, Jersey Overseas Aid, and Durrell Wildlife Conservation. And there's really interesting projects going on in Madagascar, Mauritius, where they're saving endangered species. So as new impact funds get set up on the islands, then investors and the administrators or lawyers have the opportunity to contribute to that. So it's evolving in different ways, but a very exciting agenda, I would say. Indeed,
exciting. Just before I let you go, Allan Wood, what should we look out for? What should we look forward to this new year, 2021?
I think, last year, 2020, was full of twists and turns, and it was a difficult year for us all. And I think this year is going to be equally challenging. But I think what has happened with COVID-19 is it has really driven that purpose, that profit and purpose agenda even more. And I see global investors are going to be looking through that lens going forward. From a Jersey perspective, we're very excited this year because in March we're going to be launching our sustainable finance vision. Then that'll be a 2030 vision, and that will be, and I have a passion for Africa. Many of our members here, we have about 40 members that travel in and out of Africa all the time. I think Africa will play a big part of that, and I think from our perspective, I think watching the wealth transition into the next generation It's not really unique for this year, but I think you'll start seeing more of them opportunities play out. So for me, I think COVID-19 has really just taken this agenda to the next level, and hopefully we'll see more and more capital flowing into Africa, which will be having a huge impact on the communities.
We hope that is the case. Thank you so much, Allan Wood. We'll have to wrap it up at this point. It was amazing having you on the show, and I hope that you'll be available for the conversations much later on Africa Business Radio. Thank you so much once again.
I'd love it. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
And that was Allan Wood, the Global Head of Business Development at Jersey Finance.